Format for this second panel is the same as the first. Carroll Doherty, who is the Director of Political Research at the Pew Research Center, is going to present in a little more depth some of the findings of our most latest research on millennial attitudes towards politics and the effects on politics of the generational changes we've been talking about. And then we'll have a new panel come up to discuss them. So, Carroll, let me turn the floor over to you. Thanks.
I was telling Alan this is not the boring section of the program, even though we will probably not talk about sex during this panel, I'm not sure. This is about generations in politics, and let me see if I can get this. We up there? Good. Okay. And a lot of it, of course, we'll be talking about the millennials, and we'll be echoing a lot of the themes that Paul raised and you heard about in the first panel. The word detached came to mind when we talked about millennials, and here's what we're talking about. Politically, 50% independent, that's a big number, and it's not a good number necessarily for either political party, as you can see. A little better for the Democrats than the Republicans. Just 17% affiliate, these are millennials, affiliate with the Republican Party, 27% the Democrats. 50% independent, that's a number you don't often see. Now, to be fair and accurate, the percent independent across the population has been going up, but millennials are on the leading edge of this. But just because they choose not to affiliate with either party doesn't mean they don't have strong political preferences, as we've already discussed. Here's their party leaning, which is strongly Democratic. 50% either affiliate or lean with the Democratic Party when asked, versus 34% who affiliate or lean Republican. A big gap there, and the biggest among generations. You see a little downslide for the Democratic line there since 2008, when the Obama candidacy, of course, got, as discussed earlier, got so much enthusiasm going, 58% in 2008. A bit of a change there. But let's go back to the famous voting chart. And this is really why there's so much attention politically on millennials or under 30s. This chart actually shows under 30s, little technical difference there. But this is why there's so much focus on this group in politics. I mean, what you see here, this takes the line back a little further than Paul's line. His started in 1980. This actually goes back to his generation when they were young in 1972, the famous McGovern-Nixon generation. You do see quite a boomer age gap there in that first line. This is the percentage voting Democratic. The yellow line is the 1829s. Blue line is the 65 plus. And as Paul noted, there's really not much of a difference for many of these elections. It's very interesting. You did see it in that 72 election. And in fact, the point difference there is exactly the same size as the point difference between the two groups in 2012 for the Obama-Romney election, interestingly enough. One little caveat there, though. A majority of boomers did not vote for George McGovern, only 46%, so they're still more likely to vote for him than older people, however. So that's why we're so interested in this generation. So what's happened to them over the course of the Obama presidency? Well, they've become disillusioned, as have many Americans with the Obama presidency. I mean, you can see the job approval across generations here, starting at 70% for the millennials in early 2009, all the way down to 49% today. And, you know, slightly higher than the other generations, but there's not a huge gap there. It really isn't. And a little side note here, you know, we tracked older and younger millennials across this period as well. Not much difference there. There was a little bit of a flurry last fall when Harvard found that perhaps younger millennials were coming a little bit more conservative, a little bit more Republican. Haven't seen anything, but these lines aren't encouraging for the president or the Democrats, this trajectory. Now, one of the reasons millennials are so much more democratic in their voting patterns is their diversity, as Alan has noted, 43% non-white, 57% white, non-Hispanic, and you see huge racial differences within generations in views of Obama, views of the Democratic Party. Oops. You can see it with views of Obama here. Look at that percentage approve among whites across generations. Very little difference there. Only 33% of 34% of white millennials approving of Obama's job performance. That's only half the percentage of non-whites in that same age cohort. So some of the racial differences that you see across the electorate, you see in millennials as well. They are the least conservative and most liberal generation, as you see here. They're not majority liberal, 31%, not a very big number, but these days it's bigger than the older age cohorts. And they are the least conservative generation. I mean, this chart doesn't show the moderates, which are high percentages across, but you see that line along the bottom there with the conservative line among millennials, very striking there. And they don't really take negative views of the Republican Party despite their Democratic leaning. If you look at how they feel about the two political parties, certainly a gap there, 50% favorable for the Democratic Party, 40% for the Republicans. But look at that line there. There's really not much difference there, not much going on there across generations. The generational differences there are not great. So where are the generational differences great? Well, let's take a look at social issues. And here's one where the millennials have really been at the leading edge of a huge change in attitudes. 68% of millennials support same-sex marriage. Up from 44% just a few years ago, the highest of any generation. We've seen support grow across generations in recent years, rather strikingly, but that age gap has remained constant, the generation gap in views of approving same-sex marriage. It's very striking, 68%. And I would put in a note here that we're seeing increasing support among younger Democrats and Republicans for same-sex marriage. It's crossing party lines. And a second issue on which millennials stand out, marijuana legalization. 69% now favor that. I think though that for this audience, the boomers are actually the most interesting on this line because, as you can see, in the 1960s they started very high, excuse the pun, and sort of plunged during the war on drugs days of the 80s and 90s, and now have come all the way back and more. 52% of boomers now favoring legal use of marijuana. Still not quite up to the millennials, but way more than their silent brethren. And that U-shape is something we always like to see in long line graphs like that. And here are some other issues, current issues where millennials stand out. On immigration and the size and role of government. On immigration, they're the only group in which a majority supports a path to citizenship, not just legal status. That's an important distinction there. 55% support a path to citizenship of millennials. And perhaps the most telling and important issue of the day, size of government. Our question is a very simple one. Would you rather have a bigger government with providing more services or a smaller government providing fewer services? And you see the stark generational differences there. Now, across some of these attitudes, there are racial differences, particularly that one, but even so, white millennials are more supportive of a bigger government than older whites. But on social issues, other social issues, abortion, gun control, very little generational difference. It's striking here. In the wake of Newtown and some other recent incidents, there's been no spike in our basic question about gun control. In fact, it may have receded a little bit, support for gun control, and there's very little generational difference. Millennials come in pretty divided. It's a divisive issue across generations, and you can see it there. On abortion, it's really the silents who stand out for their lower level of support for abortion, legal abortion. Now, we were talking about generational tensions earlier. Is there a looming generational showdown? I don't see much evidence of it in our polling for sure. On this question, you certainly see the millennials saying, hey, we've gotten a little cheated here in the priorities, overall priorities of the federal government. 53% say the higher priority should be programs that benefit youth. That's the highest percentage of any generation. And so you see far less support for that side of the equation, and boomers and silents, understandably, given their age, much more supportive of programs for older adults. But turn to the question that's really on the table. Would you consider, not just this is a very soft measure here, consider benefits cuts in Social Security in thinking about the long-term future of Social Security? Well, the long-term future of Social Security is really the millennials' concern. Will it be there when they retire? Most of them say no. 9 in 10 say no. 50% or so of millennials and Xers say they don't expect to see any benefits at all when they retire. Despite that, there's no desire at this point, very little support among millennials or any other age group for even the consideration of benefits cuts. Majorities across, slightly smaller majority of millennials to be sure, but majorities across generations say benefits should not be reduced. And now, in honor of Amy Walter, we're going to put up the most complicated chart of all, one that she's the only one who will be able to understand this. It's our famous checkerboard of presidential voting. Now, this is going to take some explanation. It tries to do a lot in this, so stay with me. This is the generational voting pattern over the last 20 years or so, by generation and within generation. So you have older boomers, younger boomers. Now, the blue lines you see are when that group, that specific group, voted more Democratic than the national average. And the red squares are when you see the group voting more Republican than the national average. And the gray lines, or the kind of opaque, kind of beige lines there, are when they voted at or about the national average. Okay, so what does it tell you? The millennials are Democratic. We knew that already. But maybe a little history is in order to see where they might go and what they might become. Because what you see above the millennial generation is a real checkerboard. You know, these boomers who we just looked at in the long line graph earlier, who voted much more for George McGovern than older people. Look at them today across boomers, across the different groups of boomers. You see a lot of red and a lot of blue and a lot of gray, meaning they're not so outstanding anymore in any one particular direction. They started very Democratic, the oldest boomers, and now not so much, as you can see from this chart. And so what does this mean going forward? It means that it's really hard to predict where the millennials are or where they might go. That straight blue line there is very impressive in their voting so far, 02 to 12. It's an open question about whether that will continue. Thanks.